What's going on, guys? How's it going? This is, I guess, a long time coming. You clicked it, so you know what you're in for. This is when Clarissa tried to steal the amulet. I can see some really beautiful artwork behind you, Mark. Let's start with that because everyone sees it.
Yeah, so this was provided to us by Serena Fast. She did some original art for the Wade series for us for those place cards, and this is her artwork. And I'll put her information in the description here on YouTube, so you can click on her Instagram. And I think she does live streaming stuff on Twitch, so you can check all that stuff out.
Right on. Well, glad to know she's a like-minded lunatic.
That's
and
right.
I see at the time that we're recording this, we got 71 other like-minded lunatics out in the world.
We had 72 last night. Somebody dropped off. That's annoying.
Well, somebody dropped off right after you did that. Right after you did that Right Said Fred video.
Oh, yeah. That's understandable. It's understandable.
Anyway, so this was this is, you know, call it the fourth part of a trilogy. Call it a prequel. Call it a companion piece. Call it whatever you want. This is part of the Amulet story, and I would say the Amulet is up front and center in this one more than any other. Mark spearheaded this one and decided to create a really rich Southern Gothic. I just love the writing in this, Mark. We performed this around Halloween in 2017 at a Story Bars event. They were happy to have us and didn't even need to know what we were doing and didn't know much about it. So we appreciate that trust.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And it was a great crowd and a great farm. Do you remember the name of that farm?
Oh God, I wish you would have. Yeah, I should have looked it up.
I should have prompted you before, but anyway, it was a beautiful night and good weather, and we at breakneck speed were trying to get it together, get it done. The three of us met. You know, Mark lives in Austin. I live in San Antonio. Ricky, are you in? Remind me, you in San Marcos? Where are you exactly? Right? Kyle. Yes. Yeah. Kyle. And so we don't get together very often. We had a breakneck speed rehearsal in your gym, in your home, right? Ricky, you were setting up on the, where were you setting up?
Treadmill. I had all my gear on his treadmill, sitting on the floor, doing my stuff.
Yeah. It was great. And right before we started recording here, Mark was saying, I did not feel good about the rehearsal. We were rushing through it, but we got one in and a partial one in, and then we ran off to perform, and we had such a good night and such a good time from that show. So we are thrilled to finally, for those who've asked me personally and those who have asked Ricky and Mark, where is Clarissa? Can we listen to it? We enjoyed it so much. Here it finally is. So, fellas, you want to say anything else before we get into this, before we let people hear it?
I don't know. I guess the only thing I would probably say is that you can watch this in order, but this was written after the Wade trilogy. And so maybe listen to the Wade trilogy first. And then if you're interested where that amulet came from, this is the story about where that came from. And in my head, it's a weird genre mixture of Flannery O'Connor and H.P. Lovecraft. In my head, those are the two writers that influenced it.
Yeah, nice. Ricky, anything you want folks to know?
Yeah, this story has a special place in my heart because of that performance. I mean, I'm glad everyone's able to listen to it, but there was something about us being on this farm in October at night, you know, this rundown barn on this stage with all these people. Yeah. There was something about it. I mean, and I've done a lot of gigs, but that was a really fun, that was a really special time. So hopefully it got, conveyed in the recording.
You know what I may do? I may throw up, as the audio is running, I may throw up some of the photos that I have from that event. That way folks can actually see.
Yeah.
And we should probably thank Aaron Halligan and Adam Sultan for putting on that show. Because you're right, Todd. They essentially, I performed that one show with them, and when I told Erin we had a thing, she's like, "Yep, come on. Do you need to see it? Nope, we trust you. Come on." And it was fantastic.
So kind of them. And another thing that they did for us is that originally they had us slated to be first that night, and the first performers were still performing when the sun was out, and we asked for a little more time because we were all traveling, but also because it was a spooky story, we were hoping it was at night, and they just did it. They were just kind and knew that it was important to us and that it would matter for the story, and they just did it, and it really made the difference.
Yeah.
So let's check it out, and then guys, I got a lot of spoilers because I want to talk about a lot of the decisions that were made in the production of this thing. So please stick around for the outro of When Clarissa Tried to Steal the Amulet.
When Clarissa tried to steal the amulet.
Sleep refused to come for Clarissa Traushold. The air in her room felt stale, and the hot, humid Texas heat threatened her very sanity. She writhed around on her bed, trying to find comfort in the fine linen that was all but ruined by her fetid perspiration. She arose out of the bed, lit the candle on her nightstand, and walked over to her window in a vain attempt to get some fresh air. The gibbous moon lit up the backyard with an otherworldly glow, but there wasn't a bit of wind. Everything was silent, dead still and sweltering. She'd never experienced heat like this. When her father had told the family they were moving to America, she knew there would be changes, things she'd have to get used to, but nothing had prepared her for the Texas heat. It felt oppressive, and there was no respite from it. The first few nights, she thought it would cool down once the sun set, but it didn't. The heat lingered like a disease. Some nights, she worried she would go mad from it. She understood why her father had brought them from Dusseldorf to America. He saw an opportunity to capture a new market, and he took it. She admired her father's ambition, but she didn't understand why he'd forced the entire family to go with him when he could have gone over first, established the business and a home, and sent for the family when everything was livable. Clarissa tried to push all those nagging thoughts and resentments out of her mind. Nothing could be changed. Her family lived in America. They were clothes merchants in an uncultured and detestable city. That's who they were. Better to accept it and move on. Clarissa tiptoed downstairs, her nightgown floating behind her like gossamer. She desperately tried to keep the floorboards from creaking. She eased her way past Ulpfern, the family cat that had traveled all the way from Germany with them, hoping desperately he wouldn't start mewing at her. The last thing she wanted was her mother or father getting up to investigate a noise. She decided to make herself a cup of tea, but as she reached in the dark for a cup, she happened to glance out the kitchen window and she noticed a dim, flickering light in the barn adjacent to the house. She worried someone might have left a lantern burning. Fires were nothing to trifle with, so she abandoned the tea and quietly made her way outside and over to the barn. The barn looked ancient. She understood it had been a horse stable until the owner died the previous year. Her father had bought the property sight unseen, and she liked to think if he'd known the state of it beforehand, he'd have passed on the deal. The old wood was dry and brittle, and the sun had faded and cracked the red-painted oak timber, so much so that all that was left of the paint was dark umber streaks flaking away on the gray, cracked wood. It reminded her of a wolf hide, flecked with dried blood. Huge rust spots mottled the corrugated tin roof like giant wounds, and in the rain, the roof no doubt leaked like a sieve. When she pulled the shed door toward her, it screeched like a dying boar. Something in the back of the barn shuffled, startled by the noise. The light went out. A large thud sent what sounded like boxes tumbling to the ground. Clarissa couldn't see, but judging from the noise, there was something large back there. Afraid, Clarissa ducked to the ground and froze. She tried to control her breathing so she could hear. Silence. Whatever was back there had frozen as well. If it was a spirit, Clarissa knew she was powerless to stop it. She gathered her strength and stood, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dark. Soon, the form of a man revealed itself, and soon he too could see her.
Goddamn woman, you like to scare me to death.
The old man stepped into the moonlight. He moved with a pronounced hunch and his back bent forward so that his entire body looked like a hand slowly closing into a fist. His skin was loose and yellowed. It reminded Clarissa of a dead chicken, and his right eye horrified her. It rolled around in its socket like an egg, bobbing up and down in a pot of water. The iris was milky and translucent. Clarissa tried not to stare at his eye when she asked him who he was. She was afraid it might infect her.
Just came in here to get some of Grandmama's things from the old stable. Don't want no trouble. Just wanted to make sure this stuff got put somewhere safe.
He gestured at the boxes he'd dropped. A mess of things had spilled out of the top one, jewelry and odd little trinkets. Clarissa asked him who he was and why he thought he had the right to steal what her family had rightfully purchased.
Well, I don't know nothing about purchasing, but this stuff belonged to Grandmama. She owned the old stables. Been here God knows how long. These was her belongings, and I needed to see them somewhere safe. Somewhere where they can't do no harm.
Clarissa asked the man how his grandmother had died.
That old crone wasn't no kin of mine. That's just what everyone called her, Grandmama. She owned this stable. Lived here with the horses. Hell, owned it well before I was even born. Probably got it from the devil himself. She knew how to handle them horses. Could calm an ornery horse and show 'em before you could say boo. Some folks owed it to the fact that she'd been messing with horses damn near forever. But me?
And he focused his gelatinous eye on Clarissa.
I knew better. She was witching them horses to be calm for her. I seen her do it too. Her eyes go black as night, and them horses would damn near dance for her. She was using that black magic to enthrall them. That's what that old crone was doing.
Clarissa didn't know what to say, so she quietly started to help him pick up the boxes he dropped. As she helped place old books and bottles of liquids back into the wooden crates, her hand closed around a necklace with a jade amulet. And before she knew what she was doing, Clarissa had slipped it into the pocket on her nightgown without the old man noticing. She watched him wander off with his crates into the night, and her fingers closed around the necklace in her pocket that she'd concealed. Clarissa had never stolen anything before, and she couldn't explain why she'd taken that necklace, but something told her it was the right thing to do. Besides, her father had purchased the house and the barn and everything in them. Technically, the necklace belonged to her anyway. Clarissa wiped the loose dirt off the bottoms of her feet and silently made her way back into the house and up to her room. She suddenly felt tired despite the heat. She placed the amulet next to a stack of Robert Chambers novels on her nightstand, gently blew out the flickering candle, and rested her head on the pillow. Sleep came immediately, and so did the dreams. Dark dreams of dark things. The next morning, Clarissa awoke, but didn't feel quite rested. Rheum had matted her eyes shut, and as she reached up to rub them, her right hand brushed something furry in the bed beside her. Clarissa sat up and forced her eyes to open, and she yelped with fear at what she saw. Opfern, the family cat, lay beside her. His eyes were wide open, presumably frozen in place by fear at the moment of his violent death. His stomach had been ripped open, the gaping wound all jagged, and the entrails that were left in his body had been strewn across the bed. Blood had splattered all over the white linen of Clarissa's quilt. Demonic symbols and loathsome but indecipherable letterings had been scrawled onto the walls of her bedroom with Opfern's blood. She screamed and ran from the room. After waking her father and mother and showing them the grotesque phantasmagoria to which she had awakened, she frantically described the old man she'd seen in the shed the night before. She made sure to emphasize how horrible he'd been and how malevolent he'd seemed. She did, however, omit the fact that she'd taken a necklace from him. She didn't think it relevant, and something told her it would be better to just leave that part to herself. The old man must have killed Opfern, she explained breathlessly to her father, and as she went on, wildly speculating about the old man's motives, she heard a loud banging on the front door. Her father went to see who could have been assaulting them with such a racket, and Clarissa nearly fainted when he returned with the old man trailing behind him. His visage had been horrible in the shadows of the night, but in the daylight it was downright hideous. His milky eye rolled in its socket and his skin was blotchy with anger. He pointed at Clarissa and growled at her.
There's a little flim-flam artist right there. She took what weren't hers to take, and I aim to get it back.
Clarissa's father stood between her and the old man and tried to calm him as best he could, but the old man kept ranting.
Young lady, you best return what you took. I don't know nothing about the old ways, but I knows enough to know. Anything of Grandmama's needs to be 6 feet under the ground, just like Grandmama herself. Now you give back whatever you took, young missy. You give it to me so I can get rid of it. I'm gonna give you done with this.
Clarissa vehemently denied taking anything from the old man, and her father made it clear that the old man was not welcome on their property again. As her father wrangled him down the hall and out the front door, Clarissa heard him yell out,
This ain't over. Dark things is coming, girl, you mark my words. You don't return what you took, and dark things is coming. Coming for you. Coming for all of us, girl. Dark things.
Clarissa's parents were aghast at the old man's behavior, and Clarissa felt herself vindicated by the entire ordeal. Clarissa spent the rest of the day rattled. She watched out the window of her room as her mother scrubbed the blood from the sheets, and she watched as her mother put them on the line to dry. Cleaning the stain from the linen was just as hopeless as clearing the image from Clarissa's mind. The mattress itself was covered in the unctuous, syrupy remains of Opfern, and Clarissa decided to move into the guest room next to her parents' bedroom. That night, lying in bed, Clarissa's eyes snapped open every few seconds. Sometimes she saw the old man's face, sometimes just his sickly eye, sometimes her poor Opfern, and sometimes she could swear she heard a small voice in the wind outside her window. The jade shimmer of the necklace she had taken gave her comfort, and she held it close to her chest. Memories of a better time when she was surrounded by fine things eventually lulled Clarissa to sleep shortly before sunrise. Clarissa would not find peace in sleep, however. Her brief slumber was plagued with nightmares of nameless things biting and gnawing, and of screams and shrieks of pain and anguish. She didn't feel rested when morning finally arrived, and she found herself raggedly dragging herself to the kitchen before noon for some tea. She stared out the kitchen window, allowing these images to roll over and over in her mind, and she felt as if she was going mad. She didn't want to be alone. Surely her parents should be awake by now. If not, she'd simply wake them for some company. She rose and called for her mother, then her father, but she received no response. In a sudden panic at the idea of being alone, Clarissa darted up. She knocked a vase of fresh flowers off of the table. It shattered on the floor, sending water all around her. But Clarissa did not stop. She made her way through the rooms of the house, gibbering in babbles, and soon the teapot began cruelly mimicking her shrieks. She cursed for it to stop and continued yelling, but all at once, Clarissa was quieted, and only the teapot screamed as the rest of the house was still. There, in the doorway of her parents' bedroom, Clarissa stood. There, her eyes flickered over fresh violence. It was her parents. They were badly maimed. It had just happened. The room still felt lived in, but Clarissa's mother and father were clearly dead. Blood pooled around them on the floor. Their limbs had been separated from their bodies and arranged methodically into ancient letters of some kind. And as before, the walls were covered in the bloody glyphs of a strange language. The precision of the handwriting disturbing in its patience. Then, the teapot stopped, and Clarissa, in a daze, drew her head back out of the room. Her body followed, almost moving on its own, and into the kitchen. There, once again, stood the horrible old man, the cruel, sick man who destroyed Clarissa's life. Clarissa's revulsion of the old man grew inside her like a being unto itself, and the nausea she felt at his visage suddenly metastasized into a murderous hatred.
What in the hell you done, girl? What evil things have your bloody hands wrought?
Clarissa looked down, and at first she saw nothing but her dainty hands. But then, as if staring through a stereoscope, her view of her hands shifted, and her reality came together, revealing the truth. Blood and gore covered her arms and hands. Her dress looked like the floor of a charnel house, all covered with blood and hair. She licked her sticky lips and tasted iron on her tongue and bits of meat in her teeth, and flashes of what she'd done were revealed to her, tearing it open, lunging and biting at her father's sleeping face, plunging her fingers into her mother's eyes and scooping out the juiciness within. But instead of loathing or revulsion at the knowledge of what she'd done to her family, Clarissa instead felt a deep and dark, insatiable hunger, and she smiled at the thought of feeding once again.
Dear God in heaven, what's become of you, girl? You done something bad, ain't you? I told you, just give me whatever it was that you took and we'll get it 6 feet under, please, girl. It ain't too late for you.
She heard an otherworldly voice begin to joyously chant in an eldritch tongue that simultaneously sounded impossibly foreign and intimately familiar. Then she realized that voice was emanating from her own mouth, and Clarissa felt her sense of self slowly consumed. And then something in her body, some nameless and evil thing, violently assumed control. Clarissa felt as if she'd been pushed aside while this thing devoured her body and soul as its own. And then, Clarissa Traushold was gone, her soul consumed by something that had made her earthly body its new corporeal home.
My God, your eyes is blacker than grandmama's.
And as the thing in Clarissa's body came closer, the old man understood that it wasn't alone. Other things were coming too. This monstrosity closing in on him would open a door for a horde of nameless beings whose only desire would be to feed on flesh and bone. He could feel them clawing and rending their way into the world of humanity, dragging madness behind them like flotsam in a ship's wake. Even though the old man knew it would be futile, he issued a small prayer.
Heavenly Father, protect me. Let the devil take this foul thing. Lord, give me strength.
The thing roared with laughter, and then it was on him with preternatural speed and force. It smashed him into and through the kitchen table, spilling the contents on the floor of the kitchen. The thing's teeth cut into the old man's neck, and he screamed in agony as it rent his flesh in a frenzy. As the light slowly faded away, the old man stopped resisting and loosened his grip, his hands falling to his sides. His right hand rested on something sharp among the detritus of the kitchen floor. He tried to ignore the thing biting into his neck and shoulder and the animalistic sounds it made as it fed to inspect the object under his hand. It was sharp and pointed, and in his mind's eye, he remembered a large earthenware pitcher that had been on the table before crashing to the ground. The old man wrapped his hands around the clay shard hard enough that it sliced deeply into his palm and fingers, and he brought it up in a wide, sweeping arc. He plunged the shard that was covered in his own blood into the thing's neck, and when it would go no further, he pulled the shard forward, raggedly cutting through flesh and sinew, nearly cutting its neck in half. The thing sat on him, wavering and moaning, as black blood and bile poured from its mouth and gaping wound. Its head hung at an ungodly angle and its eyes went black, and it slumped over on top of him. The room grew still. The energetic crackling slowed and quieted and then stopped, and the old man lay on the floor injured and bleeding, but alive. The Traushold funeral was poorly attended. The German immigrants had been in the States a few paltry weeks, and the folks of the small Texas town had hardly known them. The local preacher had held a solemn, if impersonal, funeral for a crowd that primarily consisted of a few curious townfolk and the Trauschold's creditors from the local bank. The gravediggers did note one strange, ragged old man amongst the mourners. He stayed through the entire service and then waited for everyone to leave before he approached the gravediggers. Just as they started to lower the pine casket of the youngest Trauschold into the ground and put shovel to dirt, he stopped them, stared at them with a watery eye, and asked,
"You boys sure this ground's consecrated?"
The gravediggers, unsure of his question, asked the scarred-up old man to clarify.
"Consecrated, blessed. Damn it, boys, is this holy ground, ain't it?"
They nodded incredulously. Then the old man opened the casket and placed an odd-looking green amulet on the Trauschold girl's chest. As he closed the casket back up, he said more to himself than the gravediggers.
"Well, I hope to high heaven you boys are right."
Okay, good times, right?
Good.
This tells me that there someday needs to be a fifth part. I don't know. We haven't talked about it enough. But Mark, I gotta say, your writing is great in this. I really enjoyed it. Very tense, but I think that this is also your best narration of anything we've done together. I really love Batman the Animated Series from the 90s and on into the early 2000s, and when Mark Hamill was the Joker. And folks who love Mark Hamill can go on YouTube and watch him talk about being the Joker. And he acts with his whole face and with his entire body. And I really felt as I was listening to this that you were acting with your whole face. I mean, it was really, really rich, because being a narrator can sometimes be kind of dry. You're just reporting things. But we did not have Clarissa speaking for herself. And so you had to, at times, sort of put on the feelings and thoughts of the character in order to convey emotion, right? I don't know, some of those scenes where, especially where, and now that people have heard it, where she is enjoying flesh and some of these things that she would have thought were disgusting before, and now all of a sudden enjoying. I can feel you smiling when I have my headphones on. I can feel you smiling. I don't know. Can you talk about the narration for this one?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned just a moment ago. You mentioned that Clarissa doesn't have a voice in this, and there are two reasons for that. Number one, when I started writing this, I played a little bit with actually having Clarissa having dialogue, real dialogue.
Okay.
Number one, I didn't feel comfortable writing dialogue for a female character. It didn't feel right to me. But then even beyond that, she has no agency in the story. So as a protagonist, she is essentially carried by other people throughout this entire story. And I felt that after I thought about it, giving her dialogue would provide her with more agency than the circumstances allowed her to have. And so she has no voice. And then the narration, you're right, man. I've been a nerd watching actual videos of voice coaches talk about you should use your face and your mouth to protect that voice. And I think when we first started, I don't know, you can speak to this too. When we first started doing our stories and turning them into podcasts, I felt like a writer reading my story. As this has progressed, I've started feeling more like a performer writing stories to perform. And I think those are two really different things.
I agree 100%. You know, once we started doing it and recording them and releasing them, it made its way. And just as I talked about in previous videos about knowing that we had the Ricky component coming in, that it changes the writing.
It does.
When you know that you've got this oral thing coming in on it to be just as much of an experience as the diction and the syntax, that you start thinking about writing in a different way.
Yeah,
so
completely.
Absolutely.
Does it make it easier or harder, or?
It for me, it makes it harder. And Todd, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I have the bad habit of when I'm writing stuff to be far too verbose. Like my first drafts are usually 3 and 4 times longer than what we end up using. And the hardest part for me is deciding that's got to go. Even though it sounds cool, I may have labored over certain wording. Sometimes single words I really agonize about. It's got to go. And so for me as a writer, it was harder to do because you can't be as precious with stuff. It's like, you know what? My face will convey that, or my voice will convey it. The words got to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, that part actually made it easier for me, or has made it easier for me, because then, you say, well, you know, I don't necessarily need to write an entire backstory of this person. But if there is a certain pain in their voice, or if they act a certain way, we know they've had kind of a certain life. And so if you know not only that folks are going to hear you, but maybe that folks are going to see you, and that there's a theatrical element to something, that it frees up the writing to be more sparse sometimes. You know.
I'll give you an example, Ricky. So at the end of the Wade trilogy, there's that moment after Mondovo. Well, I don't want to give anything up in case anybody had to see it. There's a moment at the end of when Wade tried to save the world, where Wade crumbles a cigarette package up and throws it in the grave. That was in the original, but there was also a bunch of things about how he was feeling in his dialogue. Yeah. And I realized that shit is unnecessary. Him crumbling the package up and throwing it in the grave tells you everything you need to know about it. And so all that shit had to go.
Yeah, that's a great example, and it's one of those cutting room floor things that is so hard to do in the moment. Yeah. But then later, when you didn't need it, you almost forget those lines ever existed, right? Yeah. So speaking of, we talked a minute ago about the voice of Clarissa, right? Not having agency, but I like to imagine that Clarissa did have a voice, and that she read the title out loud for us at the beginning. Ricky, please talk to us about who read the title for us.
Oh, I'll be honest, that was kind of a last minute thing. I knew that we had done Thomas, and then the Private Investigator.
Yeah.
Who
I read Thomas,
right.
And then Mark read Ronald.
Right.
And then when we did Wade, you read the title, so
right.
it was like the three of us.
Right.
Yes.
Mark had asked, "Hey, will you do so it sounds different?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So when we were doing this one, when Mark had done the narration, we didn't have the intro yet, and kind of as a placeholder, I have a teenage daughter, and I was like, "Hey, come in here for a minute," and she's used to it. I've used her on soundtracks and pieces ever since she was a baby.
Sure.
I've done pieces of her, recorded her. And I said, "Hey, can I get you?" And she was like, "Yeah, sure." And she did it, and I put some stuff on there, and then it just kind of fit.
It was so
a happy accident.
I would love to, I haven't told you this yet, but I would love to write stuff for her to actually read for us again. Her narration was fantastic, and it was just the title. I loved it.
Yeah. So, Ricky, I recently finished reading The Phantom Tollbooth with my daughter. A book I loved as a kid. This is an old library edition that got discounted, but in it, about midway through the book, it's a fantasy book for kids who don't know, for folks who don't know, and about halfway through, a book like this, the characters find themselves lost, and they find themselves in the Valley of Sound. And there is this person there who calls themselves the Sound Keeper. They keep an enormous vault of all sounds in little boxes inside little closets, inside little doors, and every sound that's ever occurred. And as soon as I read that, I thought of you, because you are our sound keeper. You have done amazing music, and we talked about the music a lot, moments that we really like, but you also have an enormous collection of sounds and sound effects. Can you give us a sense of how big that collection is and what it's like when you're listening to something and trying to choose from this vast collection?
It just kind of slowly accumulates throughout the year. You know, I'd say I have probably 200 gigs of, 3-second to 30-minute, everything kind of in between. And some of it has been from people I've worked with, you share, and some of it's been stuff I've recorded. I'm constantly recording things. I've written pieces with all kinds of weird sounds. I don't know where that came from. Me being a weird kid or something, I don't know. But I've always been fascinated by sound. And there's a very influential and famous composer named John Cage who talks about, I love sound just the way it is. It doesn't have to pretend it's a bucket or it's president of the United States. It's a sound. I just love, sounds.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm working on these projects, this probably isn't very academic of me to say, but I don't really have like a process. It's sometimes the music comes, sometimes the sounds come, sometimes I just kind of go, and it's like riffing and just put things in there. And then sometimes I'll get something in my head and I can't find it. And I record it, but I can't figure it out. And a lot of it is just kind of experience. And not only having the catalog in the hard drive, but also in your brain is hearing things I'm a big film nut and getting sound effects from films and how do they do that? And, the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, they combined a pig with a bear with a, dolphin, whatever, you kind of just...
The engine noises in various Star Wars movies and all those kinds of things.
All that. The Ben Burt, all that, who's, created the lightsaber. I always tell my students that has got to be the most famous movie sound in the world.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what language you speak, when you hear that, you think of the movie. Just how they put it all together, it's just kind of building the library in my head. And I still listen, I listen to this Clarissa, and sometimes I think, man, I wish I could have done that sound a little better. That's not beefy enough. And I'll have to say on this one, Mark and I, kind of collaborate a lot on some of the sounds, and particularly some of the spoken parts. I had done the music and sound effects and gave Mark a copy, and he said, hey, what if I read some of this elder thing language? Can you put that in there? I was like, yeah, and he sent it, and can you make it into a demon voice? I was like, yeah, what do you think? Can you add this? And we started going back and forth like two musicians kind of jamming on a motif. It was really neat. It was a great experience.
So for me,
the elder thing, please Mark talk, but the elder thing voice is epic, man. Like the first time I listened to the final product, I just had my phone to my ear, and I couldn't it was at night and the kids were asleep. I couldn't wait till the next day so I could put it on the big speakers with the good bass and hear the real thing. But that's a good voice, man.
So as a kid growing up, I don't know about y'all, but some of the scariest things were voices to me. I remember watching Ghostbusters in the theater in 1984, that summer. And when Dana goes, there is no Dana, only Zool. That scared me to death as a child. Yeah. Just hearing that weird voice come out of Sigourney Weaver's mouth was terrifying to me.
I know. And she does that little teeth thing too.
Yo, it's great. Yeah, it's such a great scene. But that terrified me. And so I was so happy. And Ricky's right. I guess it's kind of like you and I working together and collaborating as a writer. As we go along, Ricky, when we first started, I knew you through Todd. And as we've slowly started doing this, I've become your friend in my own right. And so it's easier now for me to say, hey, man, can we do X, Y, and Z? Or is this possible? I don't even know if it's possible. And so that was really fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the fact that, I think one thing the three of us have in common is when we put something together by ourselves, we don't automatically think it's canon or it's holy, especially if you trust someone's got a little, hey man, what if you did this? Because we're curious about what the coolest version of this could be, right? It's not, so that's great that you guys did that for this one. And I heard in Bobby's Last Beer, if folks haven't heard that yet, there was some of that going on in there. I saw your intro and outro for the collaboration on that one.
So I don't even think I mentioned it in the intro or outro, but the scream that Bobby does is Ricky. And when he told me that, because I listened to it and I was like, oh my God, that scream is amazing. Where did that, because it sounded to me like the Wilhelm, or whenever Goofy would fall off a cliff in the old Disney cartoons, like that kind of over the top thing. And when I heard it, I was like, that's great, man. And I texted him, he was like, oh yeah, that was me. So if folks haven't heard that, I'll throw that up over here. Go listen to Bobby's Last Beer. And when Bobby gets in the wreck, that's Ricky screaming. It's the best scream.
I think that was one of those instances where I did a couple and I took my headphones off, and I can hear my son in the other room saying, "Dad's doing something weird." You know, like, you know, they're used to it now.
Yeah, you know, can you imagine, like, some kids have a dad who's like an insurance agent, you know? but your kids have you howling and crashing things. I saw a didgeridoo on social media the other day.
Chopping meat with a microphone and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're recording a fight. Yeah.
Just, you know, some of the sounds, and yes, the elder things, but also some of these, gosh, just the sloppy gore sounds. They just add so much. And Mark, you're saying, you know, as a kid, I think it's because as a kid, your imagination is captured easier and you fill in the holes of what you can't see or what you don't know. You know, I think when you saw Dana do that, you were imagining what on earth was beneath her or inside there.
Terrifying.
And another great thing about these radio dramas is they force you to not be lazy as a listener. You have to plug in. And these sounds, these cues, the narration, the narrative, they all help you do that, but it's a skeleton, right? The rest is filling in that stuff. Anyway, I don't know if you guys have last things to say. My only thing to say about the vocal performance is that I am doing another old man. I'm sure people are sick of yet another old man, but I really tried to make this one zany. And I was inspired by William Sadler. You know him? I know it's going to be.
He's in part 2. He's Death.
Yes, he's Death. Yeah. I'm glad you're wearing that shirt. But his performance in was it Disturbing Behavior? Is that? Do you guys know that movie?
Mm-mm.
So what you did in the writing with the old man is very similar to William Sadler's character in that movie, and he plays a bizarre janitor who's going on and on at the beginning in the first act. About something about rats, and everyone is just, all the high school students are just freaked out by him and he talks strangely and he behaves strangely, so he looks like the villain. But of course, by Act 3, you realize that he knew what was going on all along. He knew the real threat because he knows about all this dark stuff, and so he actually ends up being the damn hero, even though he was in the third act he's the hero, in the first act he thought he was the villain. So they did a cool reversal with him. So I know I've done a lot of old men, but I tried to make this one a strange, menacing old man so that it would be distrustful.
Yeah, I love your old man, and I feel like your old man has different knobs on it. So I'm putting together the Hero Man stuff so we can push that out after this. And your Better Man in there is a variation of your old man, but it has a little bit more Wade Garrett and a little bit more John Wayne in there than the Papa character in Cutman or in this one.
Right.
So I love your old man. Your old man is fantastic. I love him.
I can't, because of COVID, there aren't kids playing outside, but I love to scare kids when they can't see me with an old man voice. And and just the front yard's empty these days.
It's a pity.
I think we should wrap up. You maybe wanted to say something, Mark, as we close here?
Yeah, I did look it up. The farm we performed at Story Bar was Green Gate Farm, and they are still open. The barn we performed in front of, which hopefully I was able to throw up some photos, was built in 1902, and it was an incredible, incredible venue. I'm prepping the new Hero Man stuff. We should be pushing that out. Maybe we'll do some intros and outros for that. And I'm working on another story with Todd Roth, our blues musician friend. And hopefully Todd and I will have that finished before too much longer.
Nice. And I'll just say right now, just to let everyone know that in the year 2025, Mark and I are going to be releasing a story about wrestlers, 1980s wrestlers who also work at a haunted house. So we're working on that too.
I can't wait.
Ricky, you got final thoughts or things you want to share?
No, it was a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these shows with you guys. Yeah, maybe there'll be a part 5 or 6 or a quadrilogy, whatever of Wade. You know,
I would
love it to be. That's right. Yep. All right. Well, thanks for sticking in there and hanging in there, folks. Our like-minded lunatics friends, and we'll see you next time. We'll see you for the next one.